Great. Thank you so much to everyone for taking time out for our lunch and learn today on death doulas. I was lucky enough to meet Casey a few years ago when, frankly, I really didn't have a working knowledge of what death doulas were bringing to the table in end of life care. And I was so excited about the work that she was starting back then. And the work that she is doing now is just really next level. She's working with people around the globe, basically, to try to move forward the idea that death doulas can be an excellent partner and are an excellent partner for people at the end of life, be it the patients, be it the families, and everything else. And I know you mostly came to hear from her today, so I'm not gonna. I put her bio in our chat box, and please, if you haven't already, put your name and where you're checking in from. We'd love to know where you're calling in from today. But I'm going to actually turn it over to Casey because she's the one with the knowledge. And Casey, I just want to thank you for being here for today with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm so excited to tell you a little bit about death doulas. Well, actually, I'm going to tell you a lot bit about death doulas, but first, I'll tell you a little bit about me just so you know how I kind of got to be the one here to tell you about death doulas. So, a little bit about me. I am a registered nurse. I worked in the field of nursing for a really long time. I worked for over a decade in nursing, and most people think that, you'll hear a death doula and a nurse, and you're like, oh, she's probably a hospice nurse, right? But I'm actually a nurse who came from the world of long-term care. So I worked in long-term care, acute care, skilled care, memory care. So I worked with people who were at or nearing the end of their life for, a long time. So I got to know them for months or years before they actually reached the end of their life. And then I got to work alongside hospice as they kind of went through the end of their life and death. So that kind of makes sense now how I transitioned into the death doula role. So I worked with people, throughout all of these, these ways, but I also worked the front lines of COVID. So I saw people die various different ways all throughout my nursing career, but working the front lines of COVID, I, just like many other healthcare professionals, saw hundreds of people die in a very, very small amount of time. And all of those deaths were, some of the most tragic deaths I've ever seen. People died with no support, with no family, with nobody, with no hospice even, because there wasn't enough hospice support to get to them because they were dying so rapidly. And so it was in that moment that I realized that I had this passion to help people die a better death. While I loved nursing and everything that I was doing in healthcare, in that moment, I was really pulled towards helping people kind of labor out of life. And so, with that, I actually, found death doula training. I took my death doula training and I opened my business as a death doula about 3.5 years ago now. And I started doing a death doula stuff. And then I actually opened a death doula training program to train death doulas called Death Doula School. And so for the last 2 years, I've been training death doulas all over the world how to be a death doula. So this is a little bit about how I became the person here today to teach you all about death doulas. And so with that, I'm actually going to share my screen with you because I have a little presentation that'll help keep me on track. Otherwise, I'll just be all over the board. So let me go ahead and share that with you. If you guys have questions along the way, please feel free to put them in the chat because that'll just help me to stay a little organized and on task. Okay, so mute yourselves. You're already there. Put your questions in the chat. A little about me. I'm an RN. I'm a death doula. I'm the founder of Death Doula School. I'm an educator. I'm also a public speaker. Also, if you haven't found me yet, or if you're interested in learning more about death education, and you happen to be on social media, go ahead and look me up at Death Doula Casey on your favorite social media platform of choice. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I'm pretty much everywhere. And I provide death education daily about hospice, about death doulas, about death care, just about everything. So try to remove that stigma about death just by providing death education. All right. So let's dive into the nitty gritty, right? What is a death doula and what do we do? Because that's what you're all here to learn about. Okay, so death doulas are non-medical end-of-life assistants. So that's kind of the first thing that people are always wondering, right? Like, well, what's the difference really between death doulas and hospice? Well, hospice is there to provide medical support at the end of life. Death doulas, what we do is completely non-medical. So we're not really doing anything that hospice is doing because they're handling really the medical side of end of life and death, and we're handling all of the non-medical stuff. So death doulas aren't doing anything with medication or equipment or anything like that. We are handling emotional support, spiritual support, logistical support, practical support, educational support. And we're providing support to the dying individual, the person who's actually dying, and also the loved ones. Let's dive into this a little bit deeper, okay? So, what exactly does emotional support mean? Because that's kind of a fancy word, but like, what does that really mean when I'm saying that we're providing emotional support? Well, the first thing that we kind of do is we build a rapport with the person who's dying. So we do that by really just, listening and getting to know them, to talk about what is this diagnosis that they're dealing with, to work through their diagnosis. Most of the people that we're working with, they've gotten a terminal cancer diagnosis, or maybe a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis or ALS or Huntington's disease, a diagnosis that's really heavy and means that the rest of their life could look very different and or difficult. So, really walking them through that and working through that. What does this diagnosis mean for you? What does it mean for the rest of your life? What does it mean for your family? And working through that with them. Also, working through bodily autonomy and end of life decisions. A lot of times, when people get an illness, a terminal diagnosis, sometimes they lose their bodily autonomy because you enter into the healthcare system and you find yourself going through the motions of like, okay, well, you have cancer and it's this type of cancer. And when people have this type of cancer, we do this, this, and that. And you kind of find yourself getting in this mode of like, well, this is what I have to do. I have to do this chemo. I have to do this radiation. And then I have to do this. And then I have to do that. And sometimes people find themselves maybe doing stuff that they don't want to be doing with their own body, but they're doing what they feel like they have to do because this is what they're being told they have to do. So, really kind of working with people to take back that bodily autonomy, to understand this is your body and this is your choice and you get to decide what you want the rest of your life to look like, what you want to do with this. A lot of times, death doulas will provide 24-hour virtual support. So, me personally, I'm there for my clients 24/7. You can call me, you can text me, you can shoot me an email, we can hop on a FaceTime. So, if you have a really hard day, today was really difficult and I had all of these things racing through my mind and I just need somebody to talk to, or I just need a shoulder to cry on. I'm here for you. That's emotional support. I'm here to help you through this diagnosis. I'm here to help you through whatever these next few months, weeks, days, whatever this next chapter of your life is going to look like. So, how do we build a rapport with a person? Well, the easiest way to build a rapport with them is by doing their life review. So, when somebody is facing a terminal diagnosis, so imagine, right? Like, let's say today you sit down with your doctor and your doctor's like, listen, you've got, stage four something something cancer. And now there's this shortened time frame on your life. That's got to be just the heaviest thing for your brain to really wrap its mind around. You know what I mean? To like really think about that. It's got to be so heavy on your mind. And the first thing that people almost always want to do is to relive everything that they've done in their life. It's like just kind of the most normal thing that your brain wants to do. All of the sudden, the rest of your life has now been cut short. And so your brain starts reliving, what have I done with all of this time that I had while I was here? And so part of a way that we as death doulas can build a rapport with people is to let them review that life. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about everything that you're thinking about. Let's talk about all of that time. What were your favorite memories? Tell me about, your favorite vacations. Tell me about how you met your husband. Tell me about when you had your kids. What was your career? How did you get into that? Did you love it? Did you hate it? If you hated it, what career do you always wish that you did? What are your hobbies? It's pretty quickly in getting to know somebody that you almost always identify a hobby that they have. They're a golfer, or they're a painter, or they're an artist, or they're a writer, or they do poetry. Like there's always kind of like something that people have about them that they love. You can make note of this for a legacy project, which we will get into later. But when you're reviewing all of these things with people, it's not always like these beautiful, wonderful memories that come up too. There's also other things that come up. There's fear that comes up. There's anxiety that comes up. There's guilt and there's shame and there's regret. There's things that you did wrong with your time or things that you wish you hadn't have done in your life. But that's okay too. It's good for you to get those things out and instead of holding them in. Something that people don't realize is that you can actually die more comfortably with getting those things out and having somebody there to hold non-judgmental space for you. So that's something that death doulas can do. We will sit there and we can listen to everything that you have to say, your guilt, your shame, your regret. And no matter what it is, we can just be there to hold space for you in a very non judgmental way, no matter what it is that you have to get off your chest. In doing all of this, we're building a rapport with this person. We're getting to know them. They're starting to trust us. They're starting to learn that we are a safe person, that we are a safe space here in their end of life, right? Okay, we talked about spiritual support. So, what does spiritual support look like? There's a couple sides to spiritual support, right? Mm, Dying and death is a real spiritual thing. And so being open to the spiritual sides of death is part of what we do, helping people to understand that. There's a large percentage of people who will see a lost loved one as they are laboring out of life. That could be just a reaction of the brain shutting down. That could be a hallucination, or it could really be, somebody, a lost loved one, coming to get them and walk them home. It could be the veil thinning. We don't really have any idea. Me personally, I love to lean into the spiritual side of that because I think that that really brings people a lot of comfort at the end. So I love to lean into that and let them know, it doesn't mean that you're going crazy. It doesn't mean that, anything's wrong with you if you're seeing lost loved ones at the end. I've had clients that see long lost pets at the end of life. And I've had family members think, oh my gosh, they're going nuts. They keep calling over the dog that died 15 years ago, but it was our family dog, our beloved dog that we had for 20 years. But she's literally sitting here petting this dog like it's sitting on her lap. She's going nuts. Well, what if she's not? What if she's not going nuts? What if she is seeing that dog? What if she's a little bit here and a little bit on whatever's on the other side? I don't know. I like to just lean into the spiritual side of things with my clients and kind of let them have that, to bring them a little bit more comfort as they're nearing the end. And also just educating the loved ones and the person that these are totally natural and normal experiences that not everyone, but almost everyone experiences at the end of life. And so we don't have to say things like, oh, they're crazy or they're hallucinating. These things are totally normal. But I also love to support my clients in their own spiritual beliefs, right? So whether those be faith-based or whatever they are. So if I have a client who, is religious and has a religious belief where, they want there to be some sort of prayer or, reading out of the Bible or whatever it is, something like that that will make them feel comfortable at the end of life. Whether that has to do with my religion or not, my religion doesn't matter because I'm not there for me. I'm there for them. And I'm there to do whatever's going to make them comfortable and calm and happy at the end of life. And so I'm always there to support my client in their own spiritual beliefs and their own spiritual rituals at the end of life. Plus, I'm always open and excited to learn about all kinds of different spiritual and religious beliefs and rituals when it comes to the end of life. I'm going to check the chat and see if there's any questions up here that I'm missing.
Oh,
Maybe. Excellent points. Very good, Peter. Thank you. Okay, great. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing any pressing questions there. Okay, practical support. So practical support, the way death doulas can provide practical support, helping them to kind of understand their diagnosis and what the future looks like. I did talk a little bit about this too. But also something that's really, really important here is helping them to arrange additional services if needed. So a lot of times, as I mentioned, death doulas will start working with someone at the beginning of a diagnosis, and a lot of times it's a longer diagnosis. So whether that's a cancer diagnosis or whatever this terminal diagnosis is, we usually come into the picture in the earlier stages of it when somebody is maybe still able to do a lot of things that like normal, but as we spend more and more time together, this person is going to decline and decline and decline and decline. And as they decline, they're going to be able to do less and less and less and less for themselves. So, I can give you for instance, I was working with a woman who was a mother and she was in her 50s and she had children that were, 10 and 12, and she had two dogs at home. And as a mother, she was the one who kept the house clean. She was the one who did the laundry. She was the one who walked the dogs, who drove the kids around. She had a terminal diagnosis. When we met, she did all of those things. But as time went on, she could not keep up with the laundry. It was too much. And that was weighing on her so heavily that she could not do this anymore. And so we were able to bring in a laundry staff service that could take the laundry out and do the laundry and bring the laundry back. So that was no longer weighing on her. But then it was weighing on her that she couldn't keep up with keeping the house clean anymore. So we got a house cleaner in there to clean the house so that she didn't even have to think about that anymore. But then it was the dogs. She wasn't able to walk the dogs anymore. So we, were able to get family members and myself included on a schedule so that somebody was there a few times a day so that people were always walking the dogs so that she never had to worry about walking the dogs. And then it was the kids. She couldn't get the kids to and from, all of their extracurricular activities anymore because she wasn't able to drive. And so then we had family members all pitching in and everybody was on a schedule driving the kids all over because she couldn't drive the kids around. So just kind of being there to be the project manager to really make sure like, hey, I don't want you to have to worry about, everything and all of these additional things on top of it. Like, let me come in here and figure out how we can take all of these additional stresses out of your life so that you can just focus on planning your best end of life and dying in the best way possible and spending all of your free time with your kids and your family and your loved ones instead of stressing about things like who's going to walk the dog and who's going to do the laundry and who's going to clean the bathroom. Like, let me handle that stuff. We'll take care of it. So kind of just providing practical support in any way that they might need. And this can look different for each client. All right, so logistical support. This is really important too. One of the very first things that I do with my client when we very first start working together is their end of life planning. So I kind of have like a checklist of things that we talk about on our very first meeting, and the very first thing, I'm not kidding, on my checklist is what of your end of life planning is complete and what needs to be done. And some people are great about this and they've got everything all done and all of the boxes are checked and we don't even have to mess with the end of life planning, and that's great. But some people are not, because people don't like to talk about death. And so doing that end of life planning means that you've had to sit down with some of your family members and talk about death, and I don't want to do that. So none of that's planned. End of life planning is so important. You have to get that stuff done before things get too advanced, because if you get to a point where you've lost your cognition, now you no longer get the right to plan your own death. Now other people are going to be making choices and decisions for you that maybe you would not have made for yourself, and now you don't have that bodily autonomy anymore. Your care is in the hands of other people, and I've seen that before, and I've seen that go not so great, and I just don't love it. And so I love to get so far ahead of that by, okay, what do you have done? What do we need to get done? And what do you want done? And then my step number two about the end of life planning, because a lot of people will complete their end of life planning, but then there's never really a discussion about it with all of their people. And that always needs to be step number two to your end of life planning. So if you're listening to me now and you're thinking like, well, I'm really proud of myself because I've completed all of my end of life planning, but you haven't done step number two and you haven't talked to all of your people about what your end of life planning is, I want you to make sure you've done step number two, because everybody has to know what all of your plans are and they need to hear it from your mouth. And the reason for this is because you can make all of those plans and you can have them all written down and you can have it, all in this beautiful little package. But then when it gets to the end of your life, things can get wonky and people may have to make choices that other people might not agree with. And if everyone's heard from your own mouth, like, here are my choices and my wishes, and here's what I want at the end of my life, then that just leaves very, very little room for anybody to have any arguments or any drama or any issues at the end of life. Nobody can really be fighting or arguing about any of that. Second thing I love to do is create a death plan. So, your end of life planning, that's your advanced directives, that's your estate plan that you would do with an estate attorney. You would choose your financial power of attorney, you would choose your medical power of attorney, you would do your after death planning, your funeral planning. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to do aquamation? Do you want to do human composting? You would have all of that stuff figured out. But the one thing that people don't think of is your death plan. What do you want to happen to your body in the 3 to 14 days that you're actively dying? So a death plan is very similar to a birth plan, just on the opposite end of life. So if you've ever heard of a birth plan, a woman creates a birth plan with her doctor, about what you want the room or the environment to look like as you're bringing life into this world, right? Do you want the lights on or the lights off? Do you want music on to help make it a calm environment? Who's allowed to be in the room? Because it's really special, intimate time. Same exact thing as you're laboring out of life. Do you want the lights on or do you want the lights off? Do you want to be by a window so that you could have the window open and a breeze blowing in? Or are you a freeze baby and you absolutely do not want to be by the window? Um, do you want music playing in the background? Or are you religious and you would like, religious rituals or things going on in the background? Who's allowed to be there? Dying, actively dying, the last 3 to 14 days of your life is incredibly intimate. It's not something that you typically want a lot of people paraded in and out. So, who's really important to you and who's allowed to be there for that moment? What type of smells would make you calm? Are you a lavender person or do you hate the smell of lavender? What type of things do you want to see when you open your eyes? I'll be honest, when you're actively dying, you're in a very, very deep sleep and you really don't open your eyes that much. But when you do, for those few small moments that you do open your eyes, what can I completely cover your room with so that the only thing you see is something beautiful? What can we make your death plan so that we know that your last few days, hours, moments of life are completely beautiful so that you labor out of life in the most beautiful way ever? Creating somebody's hospice room. Most people are choosing to die at home with hospice at home nowadays. So, when you do that, you have to choose a room within your home where you will have your hospice room, where the hospital bed will be set up and all of the hospice equipment. So, which room within the home are we going to make your hospice room? We have to look at your house geographically and figure out which room is going to be best. It needs to be a room near a bathroom. It needs to be a room that is not by stairs. Like you don't want to have to go up and down the stairs to access this room. And then once we choose that room, the room needs to be free of clutter. So, do we need to move a lot of stuff out of this room? Do you like the paint on the walls in this room, or do you want us to paint the walls to make them a prettier color? Should we hang different pictures on on the walls so that you're covered with pictures of your family or something else that will make you feel comfortable? How can we make your hospice room beautiful? And then also creating a legacy project. I talked about a legacy project earlier when we identify a hobby. So a legacy project, they say each person dies two deaths. Once when your body physically dies, but once again when you're spoken of for the last time. So what type of project can we create to keep your legacy alive once your body is physically gone? And then also, we help our clients to sign on to hospice because hospice is so incredibly underutilized. People don't understand hospice and they don't understand the plethora of ways that hospice can help them. A lot of times there's myths about hospice and what hospice does or what hospice doesn't do. And a lot of times people will wait for those very last days or moments to bring hospice on, but that's not wise. You can use hospice for so long, for so many months, and they can do so many things to help us. And so having a death doula there to really help you to understand all of the ways that hospice can help. And then also as a death doula, many of us have relationships with hospices in the area. So we can help you to interview hospices and choose the one that fits your situation the best.
Into that.
All those little red nuts right there.
Yeah, I was already tasting the food.
I know.
You know
Oh,
that?
okay. Oh,
I was tasting hot fish and French fries.
a reminder, let's keep ourselves on mute, please. All right, let's dive into a legacy project a little bit more. Okay, so I talked a little bit about a legacy, but a legacy project. So each person dies to death, two deaths. How can we keep your legacy alive, right? So when we're doing the life review, when we're getting to know somebody, it's always easy to identify a hobby, right? They do poetry, they do painting, they do gardening, they do knitting, they do writing, they do something like that, right? When we identify this hobby that they have, it's always great to kind of say, like, hey, what if we took that, your poetry, your painting, whatever. What if we took that and turned this into a legacy project, something that we could create, together? Or some people find it deeply personal and they like to do it themselves, which is fine too. But what if you created a project that you could leave behind for your loved ones? People love to do a legacy project. A legacy project is a way that the dying individual can help support their loved ones with their grief after they're gone. What a cool thing, right? There's no other way really that people can actually help their loved ones with grief after they're gone other than this. And a legacy project is often something tangible, that they can touch. So when they're sad and when they're crying because they miss their loved one so much, they have this book that they made them, or this painting that they made them, or these poems that they wrote them, or this blanket that they knitted them, or whatever it is, something that was personally and purposefully made from the dying individual for, that person. So it's a really, great thing that doulas can do. A lot of times we'll do it with our client, but I have had clients who have been like, you know what, this is a really deeply personal thing for me, and I'd rather just do it by myself for my person too. So again, each client is very different, and you just go with the flow. All right, so educational support. This is, I mean, each part of what we do is very important, but educational support is so important because all along all of these things that we're doing, we're also providing education all along the way. Education about dying, education about hospice, education about end of life planning, education about everything. And as we are providing more and more and more education all along the way, we're reducing more and more fear and anxiety about death and about end of life, not only for the dying individual, but also for their loved ones. So, we as the death doula, we're supporting everyone in this situation. Not just the dying individual, the loved ones. We're supporting every single person who's going through this situation together so that they can all experience this death differently than they would without a death doula. So our hope is that by the end of it, instead of looking back and thinking, that was horrible. I lost my wife, or I lost my mother, or I lost my whoever, and it was scary. And, there was fear, there was chaos, there was anxiety. Instead of looking back at it and thinking all of those negative emotions, once it's over, they can look back at it and think positive emotions. It was sad because I lost my person, but it was also tragically beautiful. We had this beautiful death plan, and we made these beautiful memories when we were, repainting her hospice room all of her favorite colors and decorating the walls with all of these silly pictures that made her laugh. And, there's all of these beautiful and incredible memories that were made along the way as the person was dying. So the memory of them dying isn't this, horrible, terrible stigma of just nothing but, fear and anxiety and chaos and this whirlwind of scariness. Instead, it's a beautifully planned project with beautiful memories and beauty instead of fear and anxiety. And then we get to the end, the bedside vigil time. So we take all this time getting to know the person and getting to know their loved ones, and we take all this time planning and preparing for this moment, for the moment when they enter the active dying phase, when they're ready to labor out of life. And then that's when we provide bedside vigil support. We hold space when words really aren't needed anymore. Um, a lot of times when somebody, the dying individual, is actively laboring out of life, at that point, they don't need as much from us as they've needed in the past, right? In the past, they needed to do a life review and a legacy project and talk about their diagnosis. They needed emotional support and spiritual support. They needed practical support. They needed all of the stuff from us. But now they just need us to hold their hand. And sometimes we don't even really have to say anything. We just have to be there. But who does need us now? It's their loved ones, it's their family members, the ones who thought they never needed us in the first place. But now they're watching their loved one die, and that's hard. So now they need us. Now they have all these questions and they need to know what to expect and what this is going to look like and what they're supposed to do. And they also need somebody to bring them coffee and bring them donuts and remind them to go outside and take a breath of fresh air or go take a nap, even, whatever. Because again, bedside visual looks different for each person. Some people will labor out of life for 2 or 3 days. Some people it's 14 days, and that's a really long time to have to watch somebody you love slowly labor out of life. And so that can be really hard on the loved ones. And so, really being there to rally around them and provide them a lot of support and make sure that they're taking care of themselves, because a lot of times they won't. They'll just be pouring all of their love into their person. And so that's when we've got to be there to support them and pour some love back into them, but also to give them education about what this is going to look like before it happens. because as somebody is actively dying, the body goes through a lot. The body systems are slowly shutting down, and you can see a lot, and it can have a lot of different sounds to it. And so, really preparing people for that beforehand can help it to be so much less scary. Um, so it's just, a lot of support we do during bedside vigil time. It says here, whisper sweet nothing is part of what I like to do as a death doula is I always say that I'm whispering sweet nothings into my client's ear or the dying individual's ear because I like to remind them that it's time to go now. We did it. We spent all of this time planning for this moment and we're here. It's time to go. You're ready. You did it. You did all the hard work and you're here and everything's going to be okay. And I'm here with you and they're going to be okay. All your people are going to be okay because I'm here with them too. And I'm going to make sure they're okay. Um, that's what bedside vigil looks like when you're a death doula. All right. Questions. There are some in the chat. Let me pull this up and see what we got here.
Casey, I hope I can go ahead and start first. I was just wondering, how do you recommend people, I don't want to say shop, but try to find a death doula that matches what they're looking for specifically and tries to find the right personality match and all that good stuff?
So I recommend the same with death doulas as I do with hospice. So I always tell people with hospice to interview at least 3 hospice companies and do the same with a death doula. So first of all, how do you find a death doula? This is going to sound silly, but there's no one like death doula directory. There's like a million death doula directories out there, but there's not one that lists all of the death doulas. So I always tell people to just Google because all of the death doulas have their businesses listed on Google. So if you go to Google and you Google death doula near me, you should be able to find at least a few of them that are in your area. And then when you do find a couple of them in your area, I would interview a few different death doulas to see which one feels best for you. The reason for this is because we all come from different backgrounds. So you just heard me talking. My background is I'm a registered nurse. Not all death doulas are registered nurses. Some death doulas have Reiki as a background. Some death doulas have massage as a background. There's all different death doulas have all different things that they bring to the table. So definitely interview a few different death doulas so that you can feel which one feels best for you in your situation. But that's my best suggestion on how to find one and how to find the right one that fits your situation.
Thank you.
Yes. Next question.
Casey, I wonder if you could talk about costs and how all of that goes.
Yeah. So death doulas do not charge insurance, or insurance doesn't allow death doulas to charge insurance. I guess we'll say that. So we are private pay. And there is not like one solid, this is how much each death doula charges. So that is another reason why it's great for you to interview a few different death doulas because we each kind of charge different things depending on what it is that you're looking for and depending on what our backgrounds are. So I mean, some charge hourly, some charge package rates, and the charges are kind of all over the place. So I don't really have a super great answer for that as far as how much each death doula costs.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. How long after the death doula does the death doula remain involved with the grieving survivors? So this is a great question too. I stay involved and do check-ins just kind of periodically. So, right after the person dies, I'll be checking in about weekly, probably for about 4 to 6 weeks. And then after that, I just kind of check in periodically, a couple months. I always mark down the date that the person died and I check in, on that yearly date. But I don't have like an actual schedule of how often I check in with them. I do have clients who have actually, will hire me to work with their family for a certain amount of time after they're gone as well. So, I mean, it just kind of depends on what they're really looking for. Sometimes people will want me to continue to work with their family for a certain amount of months afterwards. And so we can keep doing that. Sometimes they just want like spot check-ins. So it just kind of really depends.
Casey, somebody asked, how do we find a death doula? They're looking for somebody in Northwest Ohio. And I know you said that it was okay for me to share this, so I am putting your contact information in the chat box. If anyone has any specific questions, that you would like to reach out to Casey about.
Yes, definitely. Please contact me, anybody that's interested in learning more. I've trained a ton of death doulas here in Ohio, but also specifically in this area. So if anyone's looking for death doulas, I can connect you with a lot of doulas in the area. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out with me for sure. And then somebody said something about, I was trying to read that, about there being funky doulas. What did this one say? Any red flags? There we go. Death doulas are cool, but I've heard of funky experiences. Are there any red flags we should be mindful of when searching for one? So yes, one thing that I would ask or suggest, so the field of death doulas right now is unregulated. So that means that there is no board. It's not like a board regulated field. Because of that, anybody could call themselves a death doula, regardless of whether or not they've had any training or education. So there are a lot of really great educations out there. I teach at Death Doula School. Death Doula School is great education. There's tons of great educations out there to train somebody to be a death doula. But the fact of the matter is, anybody could claim that they're a death doula without receiving any education, and there's not really any way to double check that. So I would ask somebody, where have you received your education? And if they have a real wonky answer about death doulas don't need to be educated or something of that nature, that would not be a death doula that I would go with. That would be a red flag for me. So I would definitely check on that. Where did you receive your education, or, what school did you go to get your death doula education would be something that I would ask for sure.
And then I would assume you would suggest that they then go out and look at that entity where these people were trained from, right? Just to make sure that they are also.
Yes. Yeah, I would. And I mean, if they weren't trained at a reputable program, they won't be able to have any type of answer for you. So,
Okay.
but yes, you can definitely look up whatever answer they have. But if they were trained in a reputable program, they'll have an answer for you on the spot. And if they weren't, then I imagine they're going to have a lot of stuttering to do. So it'll probably be clear that they weren't trained anywhere, I'm sure. So, how does someone get help from a doula when they have something like PSP or ALS and cannot speak clearly or type, or find it hard to communicate or speak in a manner that can be easily understood? I mean, that's a great question. Is there somebody that maybe speaks for them, or um, a translator? I mean, I'm not sure. Is like a social worker, a caseworker, or somebody else that could maybe connect them to somebody that would be, um, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. That's a really good one, to be honest with you.
And it kind of sounds like that's your suggestion of getting your death doula involved earlier. Like even if
Yeah,
you might have a diagnosis and down the line you might want to use somebody to kind of start that interview process, maybe when you still have that ability to communicate really what you want.
right.
Um,
Definitely.
Oh, and I see Peter responded here. So I would look for someone who understands progressive supranuclear palsy, aphasia, and the related conditions. Thanks, Peter.
Yes. Peter is always very helpful. I know Peter very well. Okay, I did want to say one more thing. We can still ask questions and I'll stop sharing my screen. But I was going to say, if anybody here is interested in becoming a death doula, 3 things: find a death doula training program, get some experience if you don't have experience, open a business and start helping. Those are always how you can do that. And if you're interested in a death doula training program, I always recommend Death Doula School. Um, these are the modules that I teach at Death Doula School, and Death Doula School also has a workbook that goes along with it. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. Um, this is what the workbook that goes along with Death Doula School is. Here's everything that we teach at Death Doula School. So Death Doula School is different. Most Death Doula training programs you go to, they teach you like what is a death doula, and then that's kind of it. They don't really, teach so much about everything else that you kind of need to know. So I really give kind of an all around comprehensive curriculum about everything end of life and death related that you really need to know in order to, be really good at this work. Also providing a really deep education of the medical aspects of death and dying as well. Um, and if anybody here is interested in learning more about, end of life death stuff or going to Death Doula School, you would get a $250 off just for being here in this webinar. And with
Thank you.
that, I'm going to take myself off of there so that if anybody else has any questions, I can actually see you guys
We have
instead of.
one question that we missed. For those who
Here.
choose MAID options, medical aid and dying, how much involvement will doulas have?
Oh, okay, so this was such a good question. I'm glad somebody asked that. Doulas have such involvement in MAID. We have big involvement because, especially depending on the state, like hospice's involvement in medical aid and dying kind of varies. Whereas doulas, our involvement doesn't really have to vary. Now, we can't be involved with the medication. Doulas are non-medical, so not at any point would a doula be like, "Here, I've got your medication for you." They would never be giving the medication. It's always self-ingested with medical aid and dying. Doula would never be going and getting your medication from the pharmacy for you. Like none of that would be happening. We would never be involved in that aspect of it. But doulas would be still involved in every other way that I just explained, so we could 100% be involved in somebody. And I mean, I have doulas. So I run the Death Doula Collective too, which is like a networking group for doulas across the whole country. So I have doulas in the collective who, I'm here in Ohio, so I don't get to work with people who are utilizing MAID, unfortunately. But I
Yes.
have doulas in my collective who are doing this constantly. They are working hand in hand with people in New Jersey, in California, in Oregon. So in all of the other states where it is happening all of the time, they are working hand in hand with clients. They're even helping them. Just to kind of get things in order, get things arranged, set up a plan, figure out where it's going to happen, figure out who's going to be there, all of that. So death doulas are very, very much involved in it.
And I've just send you over to the Academy of Aid and Dying Medicine. They are expanding their training programs, and I'm not sure if they have it yet or if it's coming. And Lisa, maybe you can speak to this, that they are doing training for death doulas as well, a specific death doula training for death doulas that are in medical aid and dying states.
Very cool. Very
But
cool.
I also want to just say one thing too, and that is that we are waiting currently for the New York governor to sign the medical aid and dying legislation in New York. Where's my New York person? I know we had a couple of New York people here. When that happens, that for anybody who's like in a border state or like Ohio, for example, we're anticipating seeing kind of an uptick in finding out, because New York's not going to have a residency program, or you don't not need to be a resident to be able to access their medical aid and dying program. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to make sure that death doulas, clinical practitioners, everybody has an idea of how you can respond if a patient asks you about medical aid and dying. So we do offer in-services and things like that for this to help you with that language, help you be able to know like where you can send people so that they can get those resources if they wanted to pursue that. So then once New York signs their bill, that would be New York, Oregon, and Vermont, that would no longer have a residency requirement for medical aid and dying. And we do know just from, anecdotal evidence or people have reached out to us that folks are going to Oregon and Vermont, and some people are going to Switzerland from Ohio. So we know that the questions are being asked and people are looking for alternatives.
The other interesting thing about New York is that their law goes into effect immediately. And so we're, seeing that Academy for Aid and Dying Medicine playing a super important role in educating providers so that they have a network of people who are participating once the law goes into effect. So we are watching closely to see what happens with that.
Oh, Nancy is Swiss and a member of an organization. Oh, nice to meet you, Nancy. Thank you for joining
Very
us.
cool.
Appreciate it. And I put the URL in for the Academy of Aid in Dying Medicine. It's just AADM.org if you're interested in going out and seeing what kind of CE programs they have.
And I think we should also mention that death doulas can work with volunteer organizations in states with laws. Sorry, we don't want to pull away from the role of the death doula, but there are also volunteer organizations in states with laws that they could be working with to help provide that valuable information if they're not aware. It's the, you know, the more people who are knowledgeable and able to help a person in this scenario, the better, in my opinion.
Takes a village, as they say, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Did we miss anybody? Okay. Whoops, I see, wait, two, no. Let's see, thank you so much. Okay, great. Okay, Casey, did you want to make any closing remarks, or are you?
I mean, I don't have anything other than thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for being involved and asking questions and being in the chat. Peter, thank you so much for all your help. I'm so glad you were here. Molly, Lisa, thank you so much. Molly, I'm not used to having somebody answering my questions in the chat. So it was so great to have like a moderator, someone helping me. Usually I'm the one who's like trying to talk and answer in the
It's
chat. So
hard. That's hard to do, but
yeah.
happy to be here. Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Someone said we were a nice power team. And I'm
Yeah.
like, heck yeah, we are a great power team. So thank you. This was a wonderful experience. And thank you so much for having me. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you, Casey. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for checking in today. Be on alert. We will send you out the recording of this presentation, and any tools or anything that Casey provides with us, we'll send out her slides as well. And obviously, we provided her information. So I hope that you got down her email address if you want to reach out to her directly. And I will tell you, anyone who's on social media, you know, we are a small nonprofit, a little grassroots nonprofit. I use a lot of Casey's content on social media for educating people. I think it's also a great tool, and I'll recommend it to, like, if somebody's having challenges with their families, have them follow a couple of end-of-life social media influencers. It's lovely little bite-sized ways to get really good information about hospice, palliative care, death doulas, and the whole 9 yards, and to kind of help facilitate conversations in families as well. So thank you all so much for coming, and we'll look forward to your feedback and expect those materials within the next